Hey guys, Matt Goodwin. Welcome back to GB News. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Now listen, the political landscape in Britain is undergoing a seismic, perhaps historic shift, with Nigel Farage and Reform UK emerging as a formidable political force that's now reshaping the traditional two-party system. Recent polling data, some bombshell polls that I'll share with you in a second, and high-profile developments within Reform suggests that we are now witnessing a pivotal, transformative moment in British politics. Now, Reform UK's rise in recent polls is nothing short of remarkable. According to the very latest poll by Find Out Now, a very reliable, rigorous pollster, Reform is now polling at 25% with support from 1 in 4 voters, placing them in a tight race with Labour, who are first on 26%, and ahead of the Tories, with Kemi Badenoch failing to impress so far on just 23% of the vote. Now, this represents a significant surge from the 14% share that Reform polled at the 2024 general election only 5 months ago. What does it mean? Well, if those numbers were replicated at a general election, Reform would go from only 5 seats in the House of Commons today to closer to around 100 seats in Parliament. So this could be a complete game changer. Now, Nigel Farage, the charismatic leader of Reform UK, has emphasised the party's momentum in a recent letter to Reform supporters. He has said, "We're making headlines daily, and in some polls we're now ahead of Labour. In others, we're ahead of the Conservatives. What's clear is that 3 parties are polling in the 20s, and we're the one on the rise." And Farage is not wrong. What we are seeing, what we are witnessing at the moment, is a traditional two-party system morphing into a multi-party system, with Labour, the Conservatives and Reform now competing for votes. And this assertion is backed up by that Find Out Now poll, which shows that Reform UK's support has increased sharply over the last few months, rising from under 20% to 25% of the vote here in December 2024. And look into the detail too. Reform is now leading the Conservatives among everybody under the age of 65. They're more popular than the Conservatives among men, and they are taking about 1 in 5 people who voted for the Conservatives back at the general election in July. So it is clear that Nigel Farage's party, only 5 months on from that general election, is already morphing into a mainstream, serious political force. The current political landscape in Britain has evolved into a 3-way contest, with Labour, the Tories and Reform now all polling relatively similar shares of the vote. This marks a significant departure from the traditional two-party system that has dominated British politics for decades. Farage's appeal for membership, which is priced at £25 a year, which he compares to the cost of a packet of cigarettes or a round of pints, is a strategic move to make party involvement accessible to a wide range of supporters. This approach aligns with Reform UK's image as a party for the common person, standing in contrast to what they portray as out-of-touch establishment elites. And they have a point. Look at all of the big issues in British politics today: mass immigration, soft policies on crime, the failure to resolve the housing crisis, the cost of living crisis, the lack of control over our national borders, the imposition of woke ideology, and all of these issues. It seems to be Reform versus Labour and the Conservatives, or what you might call the uniparty. The surge in support for Reform UK comes at a time of significant political turbulence. Nigel Farage's letter to his supporters says, "The Tories have betrayed us. Labour offers no solutions." Now, this sentiment appears to resonate with a growing segment of the electorate, as evidenced by those recent opinion polls. The poll by Find Out Now shows a slight decline in Conservative support over recent weeks, despite having a new leader with Kemi Badenoch at the helm, dropping from 27% in November to 23% today. Labour, while leading the pack, has seen fluctuations in its support ranging from 25 to 23% before settling at 26%, but this is way down on what the party polled at the general election only 5 months ago. What I'm saying is that these fluctuations in the major party support provide a serious opening for Reform UK to attract disaffected voters. And one of the interesting things in that poll that very few people have picked up on is that Reform are also now by far the most popular party among those non-voters, people who traditionally do not vote for Labour or the Tories. Why is that significant? Because it was those non-voters who pushed Brexit over the line in 2016. About 2.5 million of them came out to vote for Brexit, which the pollsters had completely missed out. Now, the other thing about Reform to keep in mind, which few commentators have noticed, is that this party also has an ability to open up two flanks at the next election. Reform is not just a Tory tribute act, and it should never really position itself as such. It is really about neither left nor right. It's about standing above and against the entire established political class. What I suspect we'll see over the next 5 years is Nigel Farage and the Reform Party not only hitting Kemi Badenoch and the Tories in those traditional Tory shires in southern England, but opening up a second big flank across Labour's Red Wall and parts of Wales. Indeed, at local elections recently, we've seen the Reform Party polling very strongly in traditionally Labour-held areas. Now, the emergence of Reform UK as a major political force has several potential implications for British politics. Firstly, I think we could be seeing the end of two-party dominance, the end of a two-party system, which, remember, has only really been with us for about 100 years. The traditional Labour-Conservative duopoly appears to be now under serious threat, potentially leading to more coalition governments or confidence and supply arrangements. Indeed, if you were to plug the latest polling numbers into a model, then it would suggest that we're heading for a messy hung parliament, a much more fragmented, volatile political climate than what we've been used to historically. Secondly, I think we could see some real and meaningful policy shifts. The major parties may well now be forced to adjust their policy offer to try and counter Reform's appeal. This potentially could lead to significant changes in areas such as immigration, economic policy, and Britain's relationship with the EU. What do Reform want to do? They want an immediate freeze on mass uncontrolled immigration. They want to leave the European Convention on Human Rights so they can better control the borders and deport foreign national offenders. And they want an end to the big tax, big regulation, big net zero economy that has left many people, especially those outside of London, feeling as though the system is not working for them. I think thirdly, the implications of Reform's rise could really matter when it comes to voter engagement. Reform UK's populist approach and its emphasis on grassroots support could lead to increased political engagement, especially among previously disillusioned voters and younger voters. Remember, Reform are outpolling the Tories among the under 65s, and Nigel Farage appears to have significant appeal among Zoomers and millennials on social media platforms like TikTok. And I think lastly, this could really drive calls for electoral reform to change the system. The rise of a strong third party may renew calls for electoral reform, as the current first-past-the-post two-party system is delivering significant discrepancies between the share of the vote for the parties and their number of seats in Parliament. Just look at the 2024 general election. The Lib Dems polled 3.5 million votes and were returned with 72 seats. Reform polled 4.1 million votes and were returned with just 5 MPs. In other words, the bigger Reform get, the more support they receive, the stronger those calls for electoral reform will become. Reform UK's surge in the polls, coupled with these high-profile endorsements and a strong grassroots strategy, signals a potentially transformative moment in British politics. As Nigel Farage has put it, together we can create a new future for Britain. Whether this new future will materialise remains to be seen, but what's clear is that Reform UK has established itself as a force to be reckoned with in the British political landscape. So as we move forward, all eyes now will be on how the traditional parties respond to this challenge and whether Reform UK can maintain its momentum. The coming months will be crucial in determining whether this three-way split in voter intentions is a temporary phenomenon or, as I've been predicting for much of the last decade, the beginning of a full-blown, permanent realignment of British politics. See you soon. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Matt Goodwin.